such a significant figure in Republican politics going back to the Nixon White House and your development of the Southern strategy. But you have certainly changed your mind over the years about what's good for democracy in the United States. And before we go back to 1775, I mean, this book is fascinating, and I think it's very much also a book about movements. Your thoughts about where the Republican Party is today?
Well, I think the Republican Party today is not very sure of what it is a little bit too interested in upper bracket America. But I think the party system as a whole has drawn away from its moorings. You have a Democratic president supporting the bailouts of banks. The history of the Democratic Party under Jefferson, Jackson, and FDR was to crack down on the banks. So I think you have both parties today don't stand for very much aside from self-interest, and they're mostly involved in hustling money from the 20 or 30 richest zip codes in the country.
The Southern strategy, and especially for young people who might not be familiar with what it is that you developed, that you laid out, what it was and how it has changed, and what you think needs to happen now.
Well, first of all, the Southern strategy is something that has become a cliche as opposed to an identification of anything that was ever flat out there. The first Southern strategy was Barry Goldwater's in 1964, and it was basically to try to win the South by not enforcing or not even enacting the civil rights laws. The Republican strategy in 1968 was what we called to win the outer South. The outer South were the states that George Wallace wasn't going to be able to take into the third-party orbit. And that, in fact, is what happened. And once Wallace, in that particular instance, was shot in 1972, but once Wallace faded away, you basically got the South from the Republican standpoint because the psychological changes had been made. And then when there was no longer a Wallace party, those votes went Republican in 1972. But one of the things that everybody was aware of was that you had to enforce the civil rights laws, if only for realistic politics, not talking about the morality, but if you didn't enforce the civil rights laws, the Democrats would be able to wiggle back to their old straddle, which was, well, maybe we will and maybe we won't. And you remember us, we were the party that, fought for 4 years for the Southern Way. Republicans didn't fight 4 years in the Civil War for the Southern Way, the Democrats had. So what it means today, though, in my opinion, is that the Republicans have the South most of the time. They don't have to bid in a very hard way for it. On the other hand, as the black vote gels in certain places, a marginal state like Virginia, it's enough to make the difference. That gives the Democrats a new set of voters that didn't work for them before. The black votes that they put together in the 70s and 80s and 90s rarely won. Now they're more effective.